Welcome to Mortgage Sales Playbook. I'm Pat Sherlock, your host. My podcasts are where top producers, sales leaders, and industry experts share strategies that drive real sales success. No fluff, just actionable insights to help you master the art of selling and leading. Today's topic is such an important one. What it means to be an entrepreneur in sales, and what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in managing? So I have the perfect person, Randell Gillespie, my great friend, who's done podcasts with me recently and who's president of LeaderOne. Prior to that, Randell has a long, successful career in mortgage banking at Bank of America, Countrywide, Lower, and others. So, hi, Randell.
Hello, Pat. So good to be with you again.
Well, this is such an important topic because, as we just mentioned, it does seem as if the entrepreneur side isn't really discussed a lot. And I do think we need to. And I think certainly not everyone is an entrepreneur. So, talk about kind of what you're seeing in the sales world and what makes an entrepreneur. What are the things entrepreneurs do, and also the mindset.
You bet. You referenced even a post that I'd made recently,
Hmm.
and it came with a quote that said, "Never beg for a seat at the table, build your own table."
Right.
And one of the things getting right into it that we see a lot of, and this is whether it's a tough environment, an easy environment, in every environment, you sometimes have people conflict with their own thinking, meaning they
Mm.
say they want a lot of independence, but yet then they'll also say, I need you to do these things for me. And so being
Right.
an entrepreneur means you got to really make sure that you are casting that vision. In fact, I had mentioned five specific characteristics
Hmm.
that are defined by an entrepreneur. You got some great research that I think we should be talking
Sure.
about
Hmm.
specific to this business. But entrepreneurship specifically, it initiates. You got to be one who's taking the action. You got to be an organizer. You
Hmm.
got to be one who knows how to operate and operate a business specifically. And really key is financial risk. Those who take the financial risk and origination specifically are the ones who really become top performers
Hmm.
because they're investing in their own business. They're not looking for a company ROI, they're looking for their own ROI. And ultimately, all of that is in hope of a profit. A company is looking to make a profit. An individual, as an entrepreneur, even if you are employed by another company, you want to see your income grow. So, those are some of the characteristics and how it relates, I think, ultimately to mortgage.
So do you think, Randall, and this is might sound a little bit off the wall, but do you think the industry is really has somewhat of a herd concept where, in other words, the entrepreneur side doesn't show through? We seem to do the same things, and other comments have been made in the past that really the innovation side is really left pretty much to the agencies now. And in other words, you don't see a lot of companies distinguish themselves. So talk about kind of your view. Have we become more really like a commodity component and not a real entrepreneurial side?
Absolutely. And I think especially
Mm-mm.
if someone is just looking to have technology do it all for them, that's where the herd comes in. So, I get on a soapbox on this topic and I'll try to be careful because to that point exactly, Pat, if all we're doing is expecting the technology to do all of the initiative, the
Right.
work, and the creativity, then we're all going to look the same. And so these verticals that are being created by companies, that's not entrepreneurship. That's not the individual entrepreneur. What
Mhm.
I see instead, literally minutes before we started here, one of the top performers I've ever worked with sent me a note about a particular piece of daily news that they get in mortgage, and they've been frustrated that they haven't had time to consume it. So they push it through Chat GPT, have it condense it down to the key pieces, and now that what
Yeah.
would normally take, maybe 10 minutes to absorb, they can do in about two. And then they can categorize it. And at the end of the week, what are the most prominent stories that are related to what I'm trying to do? So they can use technology to help them become a better entrepreneur, not to take away that entrepreneurial spirit.
So how do you install it? Since I know that you've just taken over LeaderOne and this whole concept of having, let's say, an entrepreneur culture, what are some of the things that you think a manager needs to do?
Well, the first thing, and I think it starts with language and how we talk.
Sure.
You are one of the early ones here that are hearing this. We're really pushing this concept of retailpreneur, And we are a retail organization. We are
Mm-hmm.
not waiting for someone else to drive in the business. We as a company are providing technology and resources, support, and a great reputation and brand to help that funnel. We're
Mm-hmm.
certainly helping with a funnel, but what we want is for that entrepreneur through the great retail, allowing the person to become a great entrepreneur, helping them become better at what they do, driving the relationships, because that becomes the self vertical that we're helping entrepreneurs create rather than have a company be the one that's going out and buying companies, buying the data. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time they spend all that money, Pat, you are a legend in this industry, and you know better than I that there's only so much margin, especially in the
Yeah.
environment we have been in. By the time you spend all of that margin to do all of that, what is left is what you have to pay that person who's at the front lines with the relationship.
Right.
And so instead, what we're trying to do is preserve that margin for that performer who's creating their own verticals, meaning we're going to give them the tools and the resources, but they are going to leverage their specific portfolio, not database, but we have to look at that differently too. And they have to preserve their portfolio, meaning keep the relationship, make sure that they're driving the constant connectivity with their client. Penny Mac, CEO Penny Mac recently was just interviewed, and he talked
Mm-hmm.
about how, from a servicing perspective, they absolutely are going after their servicing clients. So whether it's brokers or
Mm-hmm.
correspondents that they have the business of, they're going to go after that. And as loan officers, because there was not the technology for their servicing platforms to have quick connectivity, we
Right.
generally could get to our clients first. But now with technology,
Mm-hmm.
they are getting
Right.
to them. We still have the advantage with the relationship, but we've got to make sure that we are now really operating our business, understanding it's our portfolio and it's our client, then our job to maintain that, not a company's job to maintain that. So I think the best companies ultimately are the ones that are teaching their people how to be better entrepreneurs, how to be better business owners. That means more education, smarter about what we're doing and how we're
Mm-hmm.
providing it. And a true entrepreneur isn't waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. They
Right.
are taking ideas and initiatives and then ultimately executing on those themselves.
So, what has been the reception with installing that to, and I'm not just talking about your company, but in the industry, this is kind of rather a radical thought. And so, is there resistance to it, or are they just waiting to be entrepreneurs? What has been your experience?
I think it's like anything else that you're
Hmm.
teaching people to do. You're showing them because too many times all we think of an entrepreneur is risk.
Right.
And that's what keeps a lot
Hmm.
of people from starting their own companies. So if you can show them that being an entrepreneur, they now get that larger reward, if you will, which is in compensation and it's preserving that margin, the more entrepreneurial they are, the better they are. I was talking to a manager outside of our company not that long ago, and they were talking about how they want to keep building their team, but they commented about how they're not really good at recruiting. And what they are good at is mentoring and coaching. The
Hmm.
problem is that anything that you have to basically contract out is going to cost money, and that reduces your value. So, what we have to do is teach our people how to funnel. We have to teach them how to make sure that they are kept informed. We can give them tools and resources to be able to do that, meaning we make sure that they have all of the pieces that are the value that ultimately allow them the reward. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but ultimately it goes back to answer your question very specifically. It's showing them the reward, if you will, of being the entrepreneur, the reward of taking the risk. That's what I think is key. And it means good communication and trust. That's what it really is the foundation of it.
So it's part of that under the assumption that there's only certain percentage of people that fit into that. And therefore, maybe one of our models, which has been common within the mortgage industry, is let's throw everybody in it. We'll call
Mhm.
them entrepreneurs, but they really are customer service reps. And
Yeah.
that's a whole different mindset. And we've really encouraged that kind of strategy. So, do you think going forward, that more of the strategy needs to be maybe less people, but actually people willing to be entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's face it, we all have to be executing with a
Mhm.
lot more precision than ever before today. There's not enough fluff anymore or extra margin to make mistakes or to have leakage, as they say. So precise execution is key. The top performers, we're getting ready to have our all company call next week, and I am going through and recognizing those of our performers that
Mm-hmm.
are doing better than last year. And it's incredible. We've got a slew of people that are up 30, 40, 48%
Mm-hmm.
higher than last year's same time period. And so why is that? That's because they are becoming and leveraging this entrepreneurial attitude and spirit, taking the resources and then ultimately executing on that. So it takes some time, it takes some education. There are companies that are so monolined. I think that's where I think you're talking about, meaning that if they're just a centralized or a direct to consumer model, some of the biggest in the industry are really
Right.
like that right now, especially on the retail side, as you know. Those kinds of environments are going to limit people who might have different skill and ability. I like personally to be part of a model that has a lot of options based on the skill set of the individual. So if you are really good, as an example, I know some top performers that are excellent with that organizational piece. They're excellent at taking technology
Mm-hmm.
and creating processes and
Mm-hmm.
systems. So then what they do is they support themselves. They add people on their team that are first level or first responder or LP1s, what some people will call them, as you know, where
Mm-hmm.
they're the first ones that are taking in that client interaction and they're creating the client interaction, but they're not the ones that are ultimately flying the plane, to the finish line. They're the ones directing them in up front. So you can have top performers do that, or you've got top performers, and this was more me, I will admit. I loved going out and making the relationship. I loved earning the trust, and then I put people around me that could then do some of the detail, do the paperwork, take the application. That was not what I enjoyed doing. You know that
Mm-hmm.
about me. I enjoyed making the relationships and using the creativity to help find ways to get people into the homes, find ways to help my business partners do more business, those kinds of things. So if you have a model that is allowing and helping identify strengths and then allowing people to design a team around that and have flexibility, I think that ultimately is the ideal model, not such of a tight procedure that they
Mm-hmm.
have to either fit in the box or they're going to fail.
So we've talked about entrepreneur on the sales side. Let's talk about it on the managing side. I recently did a poll, actually just this week, asking,
I love your
uh,
polls.
well, they're showing some things not surprising, but basically, have the managers, in other words, been out of touch in the mortgage sales arena? And 70% of, it's interesting, 70% of the whole people that answered the question said, yeah, managers are out of touch with what you have to do today. Interestingly enough, the 25% that really does represent this other idea, no, they're not out of touch with their sales force. Most of them were the managers. So the employees were saying they're out of touch with what you have to do selling wise,
Uh,
and the managers. So talk about this issue, because our industry has been stuck in doing, again, back to the herd concept, kind of the same concepts. Like the only way you can grow is through hiring more teams. The only way that you can grow is through acquisition. There are some concepts that seem to be obviously handled by a lot of managers, and that really appropriate for today? So, what are your thoughts on that?
that's a big question,
That's a
Pat.
big question.
You
Yeah.
may, you may have to break that down a little bit. Let me attract one that gets my blood pressure going. And now, companies that are looking to grow through acquisitions.
Mhm.
There's another saying that we have, and that is you can't buy culture, but you can join it. And one thing I've looked back now, you know a lot about my past, and
Sure.
it dawned on me that out of the four moves that I've made in my career, all but one were because of an acquisition, ultimately. In
Hmm.
that you think you have the best intentions to bring a group together, but there's so many competing and challenging areas. As people have observed about some of these recent acquisitions and mergers that have occurred, you, along with other experts like yourself, will use terminology like, well, as long as they execute well, it can work. And that's really is the strategic question. Can they execute well? And the issue with executing well is if you've paid well for the company, then there's really not much revenue left to help retain the key staff. If
Right.
you haven't done that with the key staff, they feel like chattel property and they're going to move on anyway. And at the end of the day, everybody good leader knows that it's the people that are the greatest value any organization. So I guess pulling that piece out for a minute, good leaders will have the relationships with people and be entrepreneurial about taking advantage of ways to create deeper relationships, stickiness for all intents and purposes with
Mhm.
their people and their teams, and they help identify strengths and help people get to their highest level. So I know it's one piece. Again, you had a very
Let me
complicated
do,
question for all intents and purposes,
sure, sure.
but entrepreneurialness in management is absolutely critical, and I think it's that part of innovation that we talked about earlier, and then taking initiative, not just waiting to be told what to do, because too many leaders, especially the bigger the organization, the
Hmm.
less effective communication that typically occurs. When there's not good communication, people are left to wonder what really is the objective, what really can I or can't do, and then that stifles that entrepreneurial opportunity.
So, another person on LinkedIn posted an interesting stat, and I'm curious about your view of it. That I think over 60 some percent of managers were over a certain age, an older age bracket, and that we don't have enough younger managers that might be more attuned to making some of these changes versus the older manager has seen a lot and is really probably redoing the playbook that worked in the past or survived. So at the management level, we're not just talking at the sales level. This whole concept of how do we get younger people into our industry, younger managers? How do we develop them? How does this need to play out, in your opinion?
Well, we got to inspire them
Mhm.
to this. It's got to be,
True.
hip, so to speak, for all intents and purposes. I've got a large family, so I'm very close to our youth. I've been watching, more and
Mhm.
more YouTube series of influencers who are, staying at a different Airbnb every night and everything else. And I'm sitting here dumbfounded, like, this is like we're watching someone else make money off us watching them, basically.
Yeah,
So
true.
it's intriguing, but what really it comes down to is what I'm getting from it is they like the authenticity. They like people just being
Hmm.
real. And so we've got to do a better job of being real with that new generation. Every good manager that I know, every great manager I know, loves to inspire, encourage, and bring along other people. One of the things, and boy, this is going to get me in trouble. You love to make hot topics here, don't you? I am seeing way too many posts and way too many comments from companies saying you got to get rid of middle management. That's the problem. And to some degree, Pat, there are even frontline young managers saying, yes, I want to get rid of middle management. I'm paying for them. What we need to first stop and consider is what is the cost versus the benefit. The
Sure.
second thing is that same manager that's talking about eliminating that level of management are now eliminating their future job course or opportunity. So it's one of the casualties I think that has occurred over the last couple of years because there are some managers that are trying to get so much of an override and make so much on people that I have an issue with, absolutely. But I also say my argument is this: a manager who isn't providing the value that their cost is clearly then in the wrong position. So it's not because I know the margins, the basis points. There are some middle managers that are way too expensive. But the issue isn't about the middle managers. The issue is about what value are we as leadership providing. Then that goes back to the entrepreneurialness. That means coaching. It means communication. It means teaching from our experiences so that people don't have to repeat some of those failures. It's one thing that I'm trying to do all the time is have regular communications and say, here's where I failed. Let me help you avoid that. Because some things don't change, Pat, right? So technologies do, the way that we're delivering mortgages or lead opportunities is changing. The way that we communicate is changing, but the communication itself, and at the
Hmm.
end of the day, delivering, helping someone get into a home is still what we do. We're not doing
Right.
mortgages. We're helping facilitate someone get into a home. So again, I know I unpacked a lot there at the end of the day. How do we get more young people into the business and help bring them up and educate them and encourage them. And that is by making sure that we're inspiring them. We are providing value. Too much in this business, all middle management is doing is out recruiting
Right.
rather than developing.
Right.
And someone comes on board and then they don't see that manager again. I have seen some really cool posts by great leaders that are saying, we need to have more proof, not just promises. And so we're working really hard on that. I want to work hard on that. I would rather have less recruiting and more substantive entrepreneurial education and development than just simply having bodies. My first job in the industry, I was amazed at how much turnover there was. And I remember
Hmm.
asking my boss, like, what's the cost? Is there a way to calculate the cost of
Hmm.
that turnover? And Pat, I'm sure you know these numbers.
Hmm.
And I still don't think we've done a good enough job of helping educate about the cost of turnover because we are failing to do that. So inspiring people, showing them the opportunity, and then making sure as companies we are delivering to those folks, helping them in their path of where they want to go in their career.
So, can a manager really, again, certainly some managers can be great coaches, but mostly they get the job because they are top salespeople. I mean, it does have a flow to it, and that's why we've gone to that model. But it does make it raises that question that there is ultimately an inherent conflict because we want them to coach, we want them to grow their team, but they really are sales guys, is what it comes down to.
Well, and I think isn't part of the question, you and I've talked about this before, and you got
Sure.
a lot of research on it, about producing manager, non-producing
Yeah.
manager. There's
Right.
strengths and weaknesses both. I have been
Mhm.
in both models as a young manager where like I stopped producing. I love producing. And at the company, when I first moved into a senior management role, when I moved in an area role, area manager role, we were not allowed to produce. So I had to hand off my production to somebody else. Now, I was one of those that as a branch manager, I was making sure that I was taking care of my team first, helping them develop relationships,
Mhm.
oftentimes handed over relationships that I had because I wanted to develop them and help them and inspire them. And that's what I was doing. And then in the late in the evening, as my wife would know, put the kids to bed and then I'd work on my own files, from 9 p.m.
Mhm.
until 2 a.m. kind of thing. I'm not saying that I was perfect, but there is a selflessness that is required in
Right.
leadership because otherwise, what happens is that if they are producing still, then they tend to be seen as competing with their own folks. That's a challenge. At the same time, and it goes back to partly answer your earlier question too. Some people are not aspiring to leadership because they
Right.
know that most oftentimes you have to go down in income to do that. When I stepped out of production, I had to go down in income. In fact, I remember the manager that I got to replace my team. She had the number two market share. I had the number one market share. We combined those. She was doing really well. And I remember thinking, holy smokes, I want that job back again, ultimately.
Yeah.
But what was getting me excited is watching successes like that. And so
Mhm.
it does require people to understand if you want to move up into leadership, it doesn't mean about making the most money. It means really what inspires you. And that goes to
Mhm.
another topic of how do you be successful? And it's by doing the things that really give you purpose ultimately. Because if you don't have
Mhm.
purpose, then you're going to go seek pleasure. And
Yeah.
that can get you in trouble. So have that purpose
Sure.
ultimately. And for me, it was watching and developing and helping people get to their, highest level for all intents and purposes. So again, a lot that we just unpacked there, but I do think from a management standpoint, entrepreneurial standpoint, it really is how do we get more into the business? It is about helping them understand those pieces and helping them want to become those leaders and leave our industry better than they found it, so that we can. I mean, this is a whole nother tangent of mine. The better the job that we do with the character that we bring to the table in this industry, the more business there will be out there,
Right.
right? What happens too much is consumers have been played games against. I think you might have seen one of the posts I made recently because I was the recipient of a text of an
Yeah.
unscrupulous originator who wasn't providing NMLS, was providing fake information. I tracked them down, got them on the phone, asked them for their NMLS. They hung up on me. I'm
Yes.
still pursuing that ultimately, but that angers me. I take that personally because they're affecting our industry and our
Sure.
reputation. And the more that consumers will trust us, the more business
There is.
opportunities we'll have. Can I give you this statistic? It's interesting. You just saw our good friend Greg Sayer came out and showed a stat about the fact that roughly 20% of consumers have an interest rate above 6%.
Right.
That means if there are roughly 86 million consumers with a mortgage, 20% means we have over 17 million customers that have a mortgage over 6%. So why are we in a difficulty from a volume standpoint today when MBA is only predicting about 6 million closings this year, new mortgages? So if there's about 17 that are above 6%, does that make sense? It means there's plenty of opportunity, but we have
Mm-hmm.
too many people that aren't trusting us. They aren't trusting our industry. They're scared of the process. They need to be better educated. They don't want to be treated
Mm-hmm.
like a commodity themselves. They want to have the interaction. So again, a lot that I'm saying there about my own philosophy and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this industry. It's been so good to me and my family and the people that I know and the teams that I've gotten to work with is what really makes this so exciting. And I want to see others come up into this industry and have the same kind of enjoyment.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And certainly, I do think what I see is certainly, and you hit the nail on the head, the quality of people that we hire. A lot of the reason why the 17 million don't get addressed is they don't prospect. And I know because I teach this every day,
Yes, you do.
that the reality of it is, do we really have the right match for what we really require? And in this world, to develop trust, you have to be an influencer in your marketplace, is what it comes down to. So I agree with you 100%. So
So based
there,
on your research, what
mhm.
what is the top entrepreneurial characteristics that you're finding?
Well, as you well know, and I'm posting actually, you inspired me to post what the 14 traits are, and I've already have done six of them. And so, no question, and we've talked about this before, that there's relationship traits that, in essence, being optimistic, being, in other words, positive about people. We know that those traits are part of what was required as a salesperson. There are thinking components that we also know you have to be a problem solver. But then when you get to the working part, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, work intensity is very important because
Work intensity.
this is not an easy business like anything else, and it requires us. We're fighting against these issues that you're talking about in a marketplace. The customer could have had a poor experience. We're fighting against all the bad loan officers, so you can't give up. And that's no surprise. And so at the end of the day, it's this combination of who we need to look at. So if you look at the total picture of what that means, if Caliber did many years ago an analysis that the total population within the United States, 25% of the total population are matched to being salespeople or entrepreneurs, because I think selling entrepreneurs is really what we're looking for. But a lot of folks are satisfied with customer service reps, and that isn't going to give you the volume that
Mm.
you need as a lender. And so we have to get to the realization that not everybody is matched to selling, and that it is a noble profession, really. And that's how I look at it. And I know that's the way you look at it. So it's
There
this
is.
combination, and that combination, they rise to the top in difficult markets. And this is our business, is we're going to have difficult markets time and again. So,
Yeah, you are so right. But yeah, what's going back to the earlier
mhm.
illustration I gave, we've got people that are up in their business 30, 40,
Yeah,
almost
true.
50%. And what they're doing is they're becoming more valuable. They're finding
Correct.
ways to gain in their own value. I think that was one of the other posts that I put out there about being essential. We need to be essential. And as long as we are,
Right.
as long as we're picking up on new technologies and then how do we use them to better
Mhm.
service our customers, those are the things that are critical for people to be successful.
Well, I agree with you. We'll have to have you come back and talk about this some more because I think it's such an important topic. So, is there a couple takeaways that you would like to have, Randall, for our listeners today?
Well, you just said it in one of the characteristics, and that is people have to have the right attitude. It
Hmm.
starts with the attitude. I know some people will say, Randall, why are you always so optimistic? Because I choose to. There was a
Yeah,
quote years ago that I saw, and I don't know
right.
why it hit me, Pat, but it was the longer you or the only difference between a rut and a grave is how long you're there. So, if you're going to be down in a rut, get out of there because the longer
Yeah.
you're there, it becomes a grave. And I choose not to. We have so much opportunity in this business. I love to look at the stats. I love to listen to what is
Hmm.
happening out there. And so, like this point, if there's 20% of consumers that have above 6%, there's
Right.
plenty of opportunity. Then the question is, how do we find a way to get their attention, to show them our value, to earn their trust? So, number one, it has to start with that attitude. And then number two, a takeaway. As a leader, we have to be selfless. And it's got to be about making sure we're taking care of our people first, not doing it for them. I've got a big family, and my kids know that I will help anytime, anywhere. My oldest son will always say, I know that if I call and I need my dad, it doesn't matter where he's at, what he's doing, he'll answer the phone. And he knows that because I'm investing in him. And the same thing as leaders, we've got to make sure that our folks know that it can't be about an override. It can't be a retention because otherwise what it does to our paycheck or our job. We've got to want what is best for our people. And sometimes that means having hard conversations and
Right.
risking losing them because you're telling them the truth. So be optimistic. And really, I guess what I'm saying is be authentic and be truthful. Care enough about someone that you tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I think if we all do that more, boy, we're going to have so much more success, so many more great performers who aren't just, listening to what they want to hear. We're going to be as leaders helping develop them. So we have a whole nother generation that's successful in this business.
Well, I'm with you on all of that topic. So, Randall,
You're good at it.
how can our listeners get in contact with you to obviously through the various things? You're on LinkedIn all the time. Talk about how they can talk to you.
Randall Gillespie at leader and the number one.com. It's really that simple. My like you said, LinkedIn, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. My cell phone number is there, so I'll save people that. But we're about trying to help people. So if there's a way to help
Mhm.
inspire and encourage, it's about the industry first. Let's make sure we're policing our own, taking care of the industry to earn the trust and confidence of consumers so we can have many, many more generations of success in this industry. And with people like you, Pat, uh, I have a lot of confidence about our future.
Well, I could say the same thing about you. I want to thank you for sharing all your wisdom today. It was fabulous. And I certainly would suggest to our listeners to reach out to Randall and certainly to subscribe to our podcast. We'd love to have you join us. Thanks so much, Randall.
Thank you so much, Pat. Be safe. Happy 4th.
You too. That's a wrap for this episode. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your team. Want more proven sales strategies? Visit patsherlock.com for expert resources, coaching, and sales training. Until next time, keep selling smarter and not harder.